Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for a Tax Practitioners Board and Everymind webinar. My name's Julie Shaw, and I'm joining you today from Ngunnawal, Ngambri country. We respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, waters, and community. We pay our respects to their cultures and elders, past, present, and emerging. Now, I just want to remind everyone that today's webinar will count towards your continuing professional education or CPE, and you can claim 1 hour for attending. And in relation to claiming your CPE, we will issue an attendance certificate to those of you that are staying online today for the webinar. So let's have a look at what we're going to be covering. So in today's webinar, we'll be sharing some useful tips that can help you manage stress and look at ways that can improve your mental health and well-being. In particular, we're going to be looking at the TPB's mental health and wellbeing CPE policy. We'll talk about what mental health is. We'll look at small business stress and mental health. We'll talk about the impact of environment on stress and wellbeing. We'll also talk about addressing workplace stress and wellbeing. We'll have a conversation on how to support others, and we'll also look at support that's available to you. And then to finish up, we'll answer some of the questions that we received during the webinar. And in that regard, we have Tina from Everymind joining us today. So she'll be responding to your questions as we go. So just make sure you send those through via the Q&A. Now, just to find the Q&A, you simply just hover your mouse over the screen, and then a range of icons will appear on the bottom of your screen there. Now, you can also use the chat function today to speak to other participants, but just be wary that we won't be monitoring the chat closely throughout the presentation. So if you do have a question that you want a response to, just make sure that you put that through via the Q&A, as I said. So just before I introduce our guest speaker from Everymind, I just wanted to briefly remind everyone about the TPB's CPE policy in relation to claiming mental health and wellbeing activities. So we understand that tax practitioners are likely juggling many competing priorities, and we know that you're working hard to support your clients. We recognise the importance of managing your mental health and wellbeing, and we've updated our CPE policy to help support you in that regard. So as I'm sure you all know, when it does come to CPE, the activities you undertake must be relevant to the tax agent or BAS services that you do provide. However, these CPE activities need not be limited to only those areas that help improve your technical knowledge. Other areas such as practice management and ethics are also relevant and important to ensure that you provide a competent service to your clients. And importantly, for today's conversation, your CPE activities can include up to 10% of educative health and wellbeing activities over your CPE period. So these activities could include attending courses and webinars about how to manage stress and self-care, and also supporting the mental health and wellbeing of your staff. So now let's meet your presenter. So we're really fortunate today to have a representative from Everymind joining us. And for those of you who might be less familiar with the organisation, Everymind is a leading national institute, and they're dedicated to the prevention of mental ill health. They have a long-standing reputation for designing, developing and implementing effective and tailored programs that can be scaled to meet people where they live, work, learn and connect. So I'd like to welcome our speaker, Elise Berrigan. She's the Senior Project Officer for Everymind. So thank you so much for joining us today, Elise, and I'm going to hand over to you so you can kick off the presentation.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Julie. I'm just going to share my screen. Firstly, there we go. All right, I'm hoping you can all see that. So good morning, everyone. As Julie mentioned, my name's Elise and I'm a Senior Project Officer working at Everymind. So I'm presenting to you today from the beautiful Awabakal country in Newcastle, New South Wales. So I'd just like to start today's session by acknowledging the Awabakal people as the traditional owners of the land which I'm presenting from, and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples present here today. And please feel free to share in the chat where you're listening into from as well. So Julie also mentioned a little bit about Everymind. So we're an institute focused on the prevention of mental ill health and suicide. We're based in Newcastle, New South Wales, but we operate nationally. So at Everymind, our vision is to empower people to implement change. And one of our key priority areas is promoting a mentally healthy approach across business and community. So as part of this, we've developed the Ahead for Business program, a program designed to support the mental health and wellbeing of small business owners. And I'll provide you with some information on Ahead for Business as part of this presentation. But first, I'll give you some more information on the small business context and managing stress and wellbeing. And just as a quick bit of housekeeping before we begin, again, Julie mentioned that my colleague Tina Fox is here with me today, and she'll be monitoring the Q&A and responding to any questions that you might have throughout the presentation. So please make sure you pop those into the Q&A box. And there'll also be some time for questions at the end as well. There'll be a couple of activities in today's workshop just to break up the content a little bit, and it would be fantastic if you could get involved with those. So these activities just require entering some responses into the chat. And if you don't feel comfortable responding in the chat, I really encourage you to consider the activities and reflect on your responses personally. So I do have a video to begin with, and I've just realized I haven't shared with my sound, so I might just quickly stop sharing and share again just to make sure that the sound comes on. Sorry about that. All right, so this is just a quick video about my organisation, Everymind, to give you a bit of a better idea on what we do. Always hard to click out of those. There we go. So a little bit of detail on what you can expect in today's workshop. So the content is based on small business. So it's relevant if you are a small business owner with or without employees, or as tax practitioners, I imagine many of your clients are small business owners themselves. So this information can be relevant in supporting them too. So to begin with, we'll quickly talk about what mental health is. We'll then take a look at the small business context, given that many of you here today are small business owners, or at the very least work with other small business owners. We'll then take a look at some of the things that can cause stress and lower well-being among small business, including the work environment. We'll look at things that can be done to reduce stress and improve well-being as well. And then finally, we'll take a look at talking to someone about mental health and some resources that are available for support. So to begin with, as a bit of a warm-up activity, I just wanted to know what you think of when you think of mental health. So what is mental health for you? If you could just pop your responses into the chat, that would be fantastic. And I'll get us started. For me, I would say it's feeling motivated and productive and engaged with others. Lots of responses coming through. Happiness, feeling well, handling stress, calm, well-being, balanced, coming through very, very quickly. So I can only get to those one-word ones before a new one pops up. A lot of happiness and well-being in there, which is really great to see. Ability to sleep well, that's definitely a good one. Great, lots of those coming through, so please keep them coming as I progress through to the next slide. So definitely some really great answers in there, and what really comes across is that mental health is more than just an absence of illness. So it's more than simply being happy for a period of time. It's a positive concept and something that we should strive towards. So mental health can best be described as social and emotional well-being, which encompasses our social, mental, and physical health that are all linked. So we're unlikely to have overall well-being unless we work on all aspects of it. And it should be noted that social and emotional well-being is actually the preferred term to describe mental health by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and amongst many other things, incorporates a deep connection and place of belonging to land and country. So it's a more holistic view of health, and it's a great way of describing or encompassing our overall well-being and its many factors. And looking at some of your responses, it's easy to see that mental health can mean different things to different people. So it's important to keep this idea of mental health in mind as we move through this workshop. Okay, so I'll get into things by contextualizing just how important small businesses are to the Australian economy, as well as the local communities where they're located. So small businesses make up almost 98% of all actively trading businesses in Australia, with the majority of these figures made up by non-employing sole traders, followed by micro businesses with 1 to 4 employees, and only 9% of small businesses actually employ 5 or more staff. The other 2% of businesses in Australia are medium and large businesses with over 20 employees. So altogether, across all industries, small business employ over 5 million people, and this makes up around 42% of the business workforce, making small business Australia's biggest employer. And I think it's really important to set this context up front so you can see just how impactful it is if small businesses are struggling. So the next couple of slides are about business stress, but before we get into those, I really wanted to hear from you. So what do you find to be the most stressful part of running a business, or what factors do you think your customers or clients might find to be the most stressful parts? If we could pop those into the chat again. Money, cash flow, makes sense from tax practitioners. That's a lot of what you'd be hearing about. Work-life balance. Gosh, they come through so quickly. Deadlines I saw in there, staffing, red tape, sales, more cash flow, increased cost of living, definitely, client demands, productivity. Excellent. So lots and lots of stuff in there, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with all of these. So what you have mentioned is very common and consistent with small business owners across Australia. And there's been lots of research into the different challenges and stresses that small business owners face. And these are typically factors that aren't faced by people working in different types of jobs. So for example, employees of large organizations who have things like employee assistance services, paid sick leave and annual leave, and who are only responsible for one part of a business or organization versus managing every aspect of a small business. So I've listed a couple of the top stresses that come up in research on the slide, but this is by no means an extensive list. So the stresses will differ from business to business and may change depending on broader circumstances as well. So for example, in 2020, stress shifted from things like feeling obligated to work when sick and managing multiple responsibilities to things like ongoing profitability and survival of the business and attracting and retaining customers. So this was a result of COVID and the impact it had on businesses right across Australia that could no longer function as normal, if at all. So it's also important to remember that businesses are likely experiencing multiple of these stresses at any one time, which I'm sure you're all well aware of. So the impact of facing these challenges on small business owners is higher levels of stress and increased symptoms associated with depression and anxiety when compared to the general population. So in 2017, Everymind conducted some research on the mental health of small business owners. And as you can see on the graphs, 55% of small business owners experience symptoms of depression outside the healthy range, including symptoms that are mild to extremely severe, compared to 37% of the general population. And 51% of small business owners experience symptoms of anxiety outside a healthy range, compared to 27% of the general population. So this is quite a discrepancy. And as mentioned, this has been attributed to the unique context of running a small business and the stresses and challenges faced. So for the next portion of the presentation, we're going to look into how these stresses and challenges can be managed to help improve mental health and wellbeing. So the stress bucket is a really great analogy that can help us visualize how experiencing multiple stresses at once can impact our mental health and well-being. So let's imagine that we have a bucket, and the bucket represents our capacity to cope with the ups and downs in our life. So we all might have a different size bucket, and that might be determined by a range of factors. So it could be your genetics, personality, and life experiences. And your bucket might be quite big and can hold a lot of water and cope with a lot of things, or it might be a little bit smaller. But as you'll come to see, it's not necessarily the size of your bucket that matters. So stressful events are represented by water that's being poured into your bucket. So thinking back to some of those business stresses that we might be facing and that are still coming through on the chat. So some stresses might add some more water to your bucket than others, depending on what they are and how much they impact you. So if you have financial problems, maybe add a cup of water, excessive workload, another cup or so, maybe chasing up late payments with clients, add some more water into your bucket. And not to mention that we do only have one bucket. So other parts of our life can be filling it up too, like relationship issues or maybe caring for a sick family member. So most buckets have room to manage a few stressful events at a time, but when water keeps being poured in, you can get close to what the limits of your bucket can hold. So what does a full bucket look like? With a full bucket of water, it doesn't take much more to raise the water level over the top of the bucket. So even a very small thing might add enough water to make it overflow. For example, getting in late to a meeting or forgetting to put an order in. So this could cause other people to think that you've overreacted, but they can't see inside your bucket and everything else that you've been dealing with or how much water was already in your bucket. So a result of a very full bucket can be that you start thinking and acting differently. So you might be more reactive, irritable and critical, and less patient and kind. So over a period of time, without relief, this could become a mental health concern. So it's really important to stay on top of the water being poured into your bucket. And while we can't control everything and different stresses may come up suddenly, there are definitely some stressful times we can plan for. So things like tax time or the Christmas rush, for example. So how do you know when your water levels are getting too high? It isn't always as simple as our stress bucket analogy. Sometimes we're not aware of our stresses and the bucket becoming too full until it can be a little bit late. So knowing some of the signs of stress is a very important step in preventing things from becoming bigger problems. We need to understand that everyone does feel stress, and it is a normal response to challenging or dangerous situations. So a small amount of stress can actually be a good thing and increase energy and motivation to make a deadline or reach our goals. But too much stress can make people feel a bit overwhelmed and affect their quality of life and cause problems with physical and mental health. So some signs that you might be stressed. So have you been behaving a bit differently? Maybe not being able to concentrate, not getting things done at work, or perhaps relying on alcohol and drugs to cope. Have you been feeling differently, maybe a bit irritable or frustrated, overwhelmed, nervous, anxious, or on edge? Are you thinking a bit differently, maybe worrying without being able to stop or having negative racing thoughts? And how have you been feeling physically? Have you been having trouble sleeping? Are you tired all the time? Maybe you've got headaches, muscle pains, racing heart, tightening of the chest, or quick breathing. So it's really important to be aware of these signs to be able to address them before the bucket overflows. So I just want to know if any of these signs of stress resonate with you or any other signs. So how do you feel when you're getting stressed? So for me personally, I'd say it's getting easily frustrated and feeling unwell. Got some coming through: poor sleep, irritable, cranky, sick, grumpy, lots of negative things in there: tired, anxious, flustered. Yeah, so lots and lots of signs that we're feeling stressed, and it's really good that we can identify those. Um, so I'll let you keep popping those in there because they're really interesting to read, and hopefully I'll be able to take a look back on this chat after the webinar as well to see all your responses. So there are some key evidence-based tips that we can use to help reduce stress, and these can be thought of as adding holes into your bucket to let water out. So some holes might let more water out than others, depending on the strategy used. But the more holes we have, the more water is going to drain out from the bucket, helping us better manage any additional stresses that might come our way. So some strategies include looking after your physical health. So mental health and physical health are very closely linked, as we discussed when we talked about what mental health is. So things like sleep, which can be one of the first things we trade in when we're feeling busy or stressed. Taking time out to relax and recharge. So this might be taking breaks at work or getting away from your computer for 10 minutes or so. Eating well, so nutritious foods that will provide us with energy. And exercise also improves mood. So aiming for 30 minutes most days of the week of varying degrees of intensity. So as well as physical health, we also need to look after our social and mental health. So this could involve things like connecting with others and utilizing our support networks. So maybe making some time to spend with friends or attending business networking events to chat with like-minded people with similar experiences to you. Learning strategies to manage stress. So for example, meditation or taking a hot bath. These strategies will differ for everyone. Joining in, so being a part of something such as groups with others who have common interests, so maybe sports, music, volunteering, or local community groups. Building your confidence, so learning new skills is a really great way to do this. Accepting ourselves, being comfortable in our own skin, so having a sense of identity and purpose. Having realistic and achievable goals. So maybe choosing one self-care strategy to start with and taking small steps towards achieving that. And reaching out. So when we need help, asking for it. We all do need help from time to time, and this could be reaching out through a family member, friend, GP, or any other service or support that might be relevant for you. So time for another activity. So what do you do to empty your stress bucket? So personally, I might do some sort of exercise at the end of each workday. So maybe a Pilates class or going for a walk in the sunshine and listening to some music or a podcast. Lots of stuff coming through there: gardening, golf, gym, yoga, warm bath, kayak, exercise, camping, listening to music. Family time, that's a really good one. So yeah, a lot of these are definitely in line with all these evidence-based tips that we're talking about. So they're definitely good things to keep up, and definitely think of taking up some other ones, because there are some really great ones coming through in the chat. Okay, so to close off this section on personal wellbeing and stress, I'll just play a quick video on the mental health continuum, and it's a really nice way to just kind of understand how mental health can fluctuate.
Just like your physical health can fluctuate, your mental health can too. Think of your mental health as a battery that needs charging from time to time. Some events or experiences can drain your battery, and others can help you recharge. As your battery begins to drain, you may have worries and negative thoughts. To recharge, look for ways to cope safely with stresses. Get help from people you know, try some exercise, or practice meditation. If your battery loses more of its charge, you may experience anxiety, poor concentration, and low energy. To recharge, seek more support. Talk to a friend or family member, your doctor, or a counsellor. If your battery is almost empty, you may be in a state of suffering and need immediate help. This is the time to seek professional support immediately. Call your doctor or a mental health helpline and get your battery recharged. The mental health continuum shows us that our mental health is always changing. We should all be more aware of the state of our mental health, charge our battery regularly, and access support when we need it.
All right, so we've looked at some of the individual strategies to manage stress, and now it's time to look at what we can do in the workplace. So I have another analogy for you. So question, which one of these is more likely to bounce, the basketball or the brick? And no, it's not a trick question. That's right, the basketball is more likely to bounce. But what if this is the surface that they were bouncing off? So both the brick and the basketball have the capacity to bounce back depending on what the surface is. So in this analogy, we can think of the basketball or the brick as representing the individual and the trampoline as representing the work environment. So when we think about mental health, we usually put all the focus on the individual. So trying to pump air into the ball or turn bricks into basketballs. And this would be using some of the strategies that we talked about earlier. So looking after ourselves or learning to manage stress. And while individual strategies are helpful, we also need to focus on the environment or the trampoline and ensure that regardless of what's going on for the individual, they have a supportive environment to improve their capacity to bounce back and increase resilience accordingly. So if we think about it like this, what would happen to a basketball if we overbounce it again and again and again on a hard surface? It'd go flat, right? So what happens if you bounce a brick on a trampoline? It'll bounce a little bit, maybe not as high as the basketball, but higher than if you try to bounce it on a hard surface. And what happens if we bounce a full basketball on a trampoline? Hopefully it will flourish and bounce extra high. So if you think of the trampoline as the work environment, you can see how it has the ability to influence and support the individual, no matter their personal well-being circumstances. So if we create the supportive environment, even on our brickiest days, we do have a chance to get through it and bounce back. So what can we do to make our trampoline more bouncy? On your left, you can see some factors that may reduce mental health or well-being at work, known as risk factors. And on the right, there are some factors that can positively impact mental health at work, known as protective factors. So businesses should do what they can to reduce risk factors and increase protective factors. So addressing ways to modify or lessen the pressure from these environmental workplace risk factors would form part of any mental health approach for a workplace. So similar to our stress bucket that we talked about, even if some of these risk factors cannot be eliminated completely, building up some of the protective factors that can help balance these out and make them more manageable. So, for example, tight deadlines might be an inevitable part of a role. However, a workplace might be able to provide flexible working arrangements to allow perhaps more time, more work to be undertaken in the lead up to a deadline with some shorter days once the job is complete. Or maybe they can provide some training or software that assists with time management and ensure some effective workplace processes are in place that allow work to move more quickly. So the return on investment opportunities for workplaces who prioritise mental health can be really high. For example, there are fewer injuries and sick days, more engagement and productivity at work, greater job satisfaction, reduced staff turnover, and all of these things impact the bottom line. So obviously each workplace is different, and some of these factors might look different for sole traders compared to those with employees as well. So for example, just because you work alone doesn't mean conflict at work can't be experienced with a client. So it's important you're able to identify the risk and protective factors within your workplace, both for yourself and for your employees. All right, final activity. So I want you to have a think about the factors, both positive and negative, that influence your well-being at work. So for me, I would say having my opinion heard and valued is a really important positive. Yeah, so lack of workplace support is huge. We've got some music as a nice thing and being appreciated and valued. Respect, yeah, deadlines are one that's coming up a lot as a negative. Gosh, they come through so quickly. Yeah, I saw team spirit in there as well, which is a really nice one, kind of involving your staff and your social interactions. ATO, I'm assuming that's maybe a negative. Staff, which can definitely be a good positive, but employees also, if they're kind of creating some stress for you, can fall on that negative side as well. Isolation, workloads, good relationships with clients, bottlenecks, definitely. Yeah, great. So there's obviously a lot of things that we can put in both of those columns and a lot of things that we can think about to address or keep up doing. So we want to make sure we're keeping up all these positive things that we have going on and then working towards reducing these sort of more negative risk factors. So I'll pop into the next slide, which has just a couple of examples of some risk factors and some actions that you can take to address these and improve mental health at work. So the first one up there is isolation, which could include working on your own a lot or having very few interactions with employees and clients. To address this, you might make an effort to have friendly encounters or chats with people you interact with each day. If you have staff, maybe encourage these interactions or complete team building exercises. And another good thing you can do is join networking groups to connect with other business owners. The next one up there is lack of communication about workplace issues. So where there's no open communication to share issues or little communication about issue resolution, it can create a bit of distress. So making sure you encourage your staff to identify and share workplace issues. And once you're aware of them, communicate about how they'll be addressed in a timely manner. So if you have no employees, it's also important to be aware yourself of any workplace issues and work towards resolving them as well. Another problem is poor work-life balance, which includes long working hours or not taking breaks or taking work home with you even. So to address this, you might set some regular work hours and stick to them. Maybe make sure you take your lunch break every day and plan for some leave, even if it's just a short break. And this might also include things like not checking or responding to emails while at home or outside of work hours, which is definitely something relevant to those that work from home as well. So next up on there is poor job design. So this could include things like incorrect or insufficient tools to complete a job properly, maybe unreasonable workloads or unrealistic deadlines. So if you have a heavy workload, maybe you can negotiate extending some deadlines to help reduce stress and pressure, or invest in some tools that can increase efficiency. This could also include outsourcing certain aspects of the business if they're not your area of expertise. So for example, maybe marketing or recruiting new staff, which gives you some time to focus on the core business functions. And lastly, up there, we've got poor environmental conditions, which relates to work health and safety issues, as well as the work environment more broadly. So being sure to adhere to work health and safety regulations, which you can find easily at Safe Work Australia, but also looking at what you can do to improve your own workplace that suits your needs. So for example, just buying a comfier chair, playing some music, increasing natural lighting and greenery in the office, just to create a better and more welcoming work atmosphere. So everyone's workplace is different, and some of these factors might not apply to you, but the main thing to take away from this is to think about your own workplace factors and tailor solutions for them. And also remembering to take a look at things that are going well and keeping them up too. So we're coming towards the end of the webinar now, but I wanted to make sure we touch on something that we know is common among certain industries, including tax practitioners. So this is what we call accidental counselling, and it's exactly what it sounds like. So it's when someone doesn't necessarily have counselling qualifications, but due to the nature of their role, might find themselves accidentally counselling someone and talking to them about their mental health and well-being. So given your role will involve talk about financial stress and other aspects of running a business with your clients, you might end up having some difficult conversations. So knowing how to have a conversation about mental health can be beneficial for you to help you feel more in control, as well as for the person you're supporting. So they'll have more information and encouragement to seek further support. So these conversation skills can also apply to your employees, both inside and outside your business. So sometimes it might not be super obvious when someone needs support, but there are a few things that you can look out for in your employees or your clients that may indicate they're having a hard time. So there are a few signs to look out for on the screen there. So things like a recent change in behavior, maybe someone who's normally pretty chatty has become quiet and reserved. It could be maybe obsession with some parts of the job, but neglecting others, a change in working hours, so longer or reduced hours, maybe being disengaged and having low morale, It could be an increase in unplanned absences from work, or arriving late to work or meetings on a regular basis. Maybe they're speaking negatively about themselves or others, or even having conflict with others. Maybe their performance or work standards are slipping as well. So it could also be physical signs, like being tired all the time, reporting feeling unwell or having headaches frequently, or maybe their physical appearance has changed. So, for example, not looking after themselves as much as they normally do, or looking tired. So any one of these signs on their own doesn't necessarily mean someone has a mental illness. But a mental illness is a combination of multiple signs and severity. So it's more if one of these symptoms gets worse over time or seem to be sticking around for a long time, then we may want to check in with someone. Okay, so we don't have too much time to go into the specifics around having a conversation about mental health, but one of the key messages is that you don't have to be an expert to have all the answers. You just have to listen, acknowledge, and encourage them to seek support. So the ALEC acronym is a really helpful and simple way of remembering what to do. So first up is ask. So if in doubt, it never hurts to ask. So someone might display some of the signs we just discussed, or say something as a joke, or mention in passing that they're struggling. So simply ask them, are you okay? So for example, you might say something like, I noticed before that you said you felt like everything was too much and you felt like giving up. I just wanted to check in and see whether you were all right, or if there's anything you wanted to talk about. So you can't push people to open up and talk to you, but even if they say they're fine, you can make sure to leave an open offer. So for example, you might just say something like, well, just so you know, you can come to me if you need someone to talk to. So next up is listen. So assuming they want to talk, ensure you actively listen. So nod and ask questions if it's appropriate. You don't need to offer your opinion or your own personal experiences, and you don't need to tell them that they'll be all right or offer them solutions. So for example, you might just say something like, that sounds really tough, and I'm sorry to hear that you're going through that. After that, you should encourage action. So seeking professional support by visiting a GP, maybe helping them look up some local support services. New Access for Small Business Owners is a new counselling program specifically for small business owners run by Beyond Blue. So that's a great resource to recommend. Or asking whether they have someone close to them that they can share this with, so a friend or a family member. And lastly, just being sure to check back in. So this shows that you genuinely care. So you might finish your conversation by saying something like, I'll check back in with you next week and see what you decided about visiting your GP. So these conversations obviously aren't always easy, but you can't assume that somebody else has talked to them about their mental health concerns, and you might be the first person to ask and help them feel supported and more comfortable seeking the support that they might need. All right, so at the very start of this presentation, I mentioned one of the key program areas at Everymind was the Ahead for Business digital portal. So for the last little bit, I'll just provide you with some more information on this great resource. So Ahead for Business is a website designed to support the mental health and wellbeing of small business owners. So it hosts a variety of different tools and resources tailored to the specific needs of small business owners that help them take action on their own mental health. So you'll be able to find more in-depth information on everything we've discussed in today's webinar on the digital portal as well. So there's an extensive range of different resources, including written articles, podcasts, videos, training and toolkits. You can also find Q&As, blogs, and videos with real small business owners sharing their unique experiences and perspectives of running a business. So business owners can keep up to date on sector news as well. So news relating to small business and mental health through our news items in our quarterly newsletter. And there's also some self-checkups which business owners can use, which I'll just detail in the next slide. So the checkups are among some of our most popular resources on the Digital Hub. And it's a great resource to use yourself or suggest to someone else to complete as well. So the first checkup on there is a mental health checkup, which uses standardized scales to assess symptoms of depression, anxiety, stress, well-being, and alcohol use. And once complete, you'll be presented with your results, which can be downloaded as a letter to give to your doctor. And this can really make it easier to ask for help and get the conversation started if you need it. You'll also be recommended some resources which can provide you with some further guidance and support in your areas of concern. The business stress test is the next one. So it helps you identify current challenges and stresses that could be affecting your mental health. And once complete, it will again provide you with some tools and resources that may be able to assist based on your responses. And the final tool that forms part of the checkups is the wellbeing plan. So this is a tool business owners can use to identify their risk and protective factors and strategies they can use to support their mental health. So it provides you with information and helps get you thinking about things that you can do to support your own wellbeing. So we've recently also created a wellbeing for rural agribusiness owners as they face some pretty unique challenges, and the new wellbeing plan aims to address them more specifically. So this is a great resource to recommend if you're working with anyone from the agricultural industry as well. So as part of Ahead for Business, we've also developed an online training to build the knowledge, skills and practices of small business owners around mental health and wellbeing in their business. And the training also has employee learning pathways. So small business owners can encourage their team to complete the modules so that the whole workplace has information about mental health and the importance of a mentally healthy workplace. So this is a self-paced training that can be saved and resumed at any time. So it's really convenient for business owners to use. It's got 4 short modules, which are different for small business owners and employees. So they cover topics around mental health, stigma, effective communication, stress management and self-care, and mental health in the workplace. So we did a trial of the training and it revealed significant increases in knowledge around mental health and mental illness, as well as the confidence of small business owners to manage their own and others' mental health while at work. So this training is also accessible through the Ahead for Business site. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. So thank you so much everyone for listening. I hope you've learned something valuable. I can see the chat going off in the corner of my eye and can see you sharing tips and everything through there, which is really great to see. So we do have time for a few questions. If you'd like to put any into the Q&A box, I haven't had a look at it the whole presentation. So if there's anything that wasn't covered by Tina or just please feel free to pop it in there and I'll see if I can get to it. And while we do that, it would be fantastic if you could fill out a really quick feedback and evaluation survey about today's presentation. So Tina will paste the link for that in the chat for you to follow. And it will only take a couple of minutes and it will really help us continue to improve our presentations. So hopefully you can find the link in that chat. Thank you everyone for your thank yous. And I'm sure it will be sent out as well following the webinar, just so you can fill that in. Let me grab that Q&A box up and see if there's anything in here. So we've got, is Ahead for Business a free service in there? Yes, it definitely is. Oh, I can see Tina's typing an answer. There we go. So everything on there is free to access. So please feel free to go in and have a look at that. Website's up on the screen there. One about asking whether the stress test has a question about ATO debt, considering small business debt is huge to the ATO. We don't have that question in there. We do have a question more broadly about financial stress. So it is possible that we could delve a little bit deeper into that, but we are trying to make it quite a quick thing to do to identify. But financial stress does consistently come up as one of the top stresses for business owners. So it is possibly quite important for us to delve into that a bit more deeply. Gosh, so many coming through.
Elise, it's Julie here. I've seen a couple of questions come through, if you don't mind me putting a couple to you.
Go for it.
We had one there asking earlier on what the difference is between mental health and mental well-being.
Yeah, so they are very similar concepts, and they're both kind of encompassing all of those positives that we talked about before. We often talk about mental health and mental illness as the flip side of it, whereas I think well-being is more just that positive concept that doesn't really have any of those connotations of mental illness or mental ill health. So mental health and mental well-being are very, very similar concepts focused on positive aspects. those social and emotional well-being sorts of things.
Excellent, thank you. A couple of people are asking us where they can access resources, but I think what we'll do is we'll share some links following the presentation today. So we generally send out an email just, thanking you for coming along and giving you some extra information. So we'll include those links in that as well. So yeah, they'll be coming your way in the next day or so. Another question that I've seen, Elise, what are some signs to look for if an employee may be experiencing mental health issues?
Yeah, so we did go through a couple of them, and I think one of the important things is that you know the person quite well, and if you think something's a little bit off, then it is always worth checking in. So if they are a bit quiet and withdrawn, or perhaps they're just maybe not as engaged with their work or in kind of talking to others around the workplace as they usually are. So I think it's more about just noticing whether there is a change in their behavior rather than looking for the specific signs, because mental health concerns can kind of present in different ways in different people. So it's kind of up to your best judgment. And when you go to have a conversation with them, you can just kind of note the behaviors that you've noticed or the things that they've said, just to kind of give them some information on why you feel like they might be struggling a little bit.
Excellent, thank you for that. Another question that I'll just quickly respond to is there a link we can give our thoughts to on the seminar? Yes, absolutely. We'll send out a survey following the webinar today. So we'll be really grateful if you can send through anything that you have there. People are asking whether the slides are available. Yes, absolutely. We'll pop them on our website. So our webinar resources hub, we'll pop them up there for you as well. Elise, were there any others in the Q&A that you wanted to address at the moment?
Let me see. Slow reader, sorry.
That's okay. There's a lot. It's been a really
I'm
engaged
trying to
session,
skim
so
them,
thanks
and
everyone.
skimming doesn't really work for questions. So there's one in here about sometimes asking if they're okay can cause more stress, and if there's another way of asking. I think it just really depends on how you phrase it. So like I said before, if you're just kind of noticing some out of the ordinary behaviors in someone rather than accusing them. So if you just kind of go in and say, it seems like you're struggling, sometimes people feel a little bit accused. So kind of approaching the conversation in a, I noticed that you're really quiet at the moment and you haven't been coming out to our after work activities like you usually do, wondering if you're okay at the moment. So I think kind of shifting the conversation to be a bit less accusatory and more supportive can kind of help reduce the stress on the other person as well, so that they know why you're asking.
Fantastic.
Okay.
What else have we got here?
On that one. So one up here is just how we can best address and serve a client exhibiting mental health symptoms. And it is, obviously you might have a lot of different clients, and I think it's just important to ask the question, or at least just direct them to some support that they can use. So having those conversations and directing them to support, you don't have to be their main support person, but I think just showing them that you do care and that support is available is a really important thing to do. So if you can look up maybe some free services in your area, that is a really good thing to send through to them. I did mention new access to small business owners before, which we'll definitely send a link round for after the presentation as well. So that's a service designed specifically for small business owners and run by small business owners that really understand that context. So referring them onto that is a really great thing to do as well. More coming through. If I suggest to a client to look at the stress test, do they get some useful information? Yes. So at the end of the stress test, you'll get kind of some rankings on how stressed you are about the certain things that were asked about. And then you'll be recommended some ahead for business resources specific to your top stressors. So for example, if you're having trouble kind of managing your employees, you'll be recommended some resources that can help with that. So usually they're written resources with sort of some high level information, and then you can delve a little bit deeper into further reading and some external resources if that's what you'd like to do. So yeah, it's a really good starting point to kind of filter through, because there are lots of different resources out there. But the business stress test is a really good way to kind of narrow down on the ones that are relevant.
We've also got Susan asking if she can get a list of useful chat notes that have been discussed today. And yes, we will definitely send you some helpful links so that you can access some other information. Not a problem. We've got some John asking if they can get a copy of the agri-specific resource for farmers. Is that something that you have available, Elise?
Yeah, so that's also on the Ahead Business website, just under the checkups tab. But we can definitely send that link through as a specific separate one at the end of the webinar as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So what should we do if the employer doesn't listen when we are advising they are under too much pressure and have too much work? So I'm assuming in this case, employer kind of means client. And this can be really difficult. And I think it's about kind of just setting expectations up front. Perhaps, this might not be done as quick as you're wanting it to be because we're under too much pressure and we have a lot of other work going on. So expectation setting is really important. And then also kind of just learning what your limits are. So maybe not taking on new clients or new jobs. Maybe you can only manage kind of X amount at a time and just kind of sticking to that. So finding your rhythm with things as well. One about CPE, which I do not know about, but I'm going to assume the business wellbeing online training doesn't count towards CPE at this point in time. And any further consideration for employee who has a diagnosed disability that can affect depression and anxiety when they are trying to fulfill the TPB hours? I'm not sure I understand that question, sorry. And I'm not sure if it's more related to Julie and the TPB rather than my side of things.
At least we might reach out to Isabel out of the session and respond to that one.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that's the best for this one.
Perfect. No open questions. There we go.
Okay. Thank you. That was amazing. I think we've answered everything there. So let's wrap it up and just give people some information on how to stay in touch with us. So if you'd like more information, you can visit our website. It's tpb.gov.au. You can also follow us on social media. We have Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter. We also have a monthly newsletter, which is TPB e-news, and you can subscribe to that on our website. Just jump onto the link, which is tpb.gov.au/newsroom. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive notifications when we post new videos. We do record all of our webinars, including this one. And if you do watch them on our YouTube channel, you can still claim your CPE or CPD for viewing them, which is really good news. I just want to say a really big thank you to Elise and Tina for providing all that useful information today. It was such a great session and we had a lot of engagement, which really indicated how everyone received the presentation today. It was really, really helpful. I also want to say thank you to everyone in the audience today for joining us. If you are interested in attending any other webinars that we offer, you can jump on our website once again and just go to tpb.gov.au/webinars, and we've got a list of upcoming events there. We actually have a really good session coming up in a couple of weeks on cyber security, so I'd really encourage everyone to come along to that. And then just before we do finish, I'll be launching an exit survey, and we would really appreciate it if you could take the time to complete the survey. It's really quick, only takes a moment of your time, and your feedback is really helpful for us. It helps us improve on the webinars, and also we've got a question in there about any topics that you might want to hear about from us. So absolutely encourage you to send through any topics that you might be interested in hearing about, and we'll endeavour to get those up and running for you. So the survey is just going to pop up in your browser when you leave the webinar. And once again, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Stay safe, and we hope to talk to you again sometime soon. Thanks, everyone.